Greetings. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. I wanted to thank you all once again for your comments and discussion, as usual. There's such a varying spectrum of followers on this channel. I really like it. Even the fact that so many, quote unquote denier types follow this channel. And like to pick at me once in a while. Don't necessarily enjoy the picking, but I feel like I'm doing something right. If you have, what's the saying? It's if you don't, if you have haters, you're doing something correctly, or you're really not successful until you have people that hate you, is another way to put that quote. There are a million different variations on that theme. Have something going on here. Yeah, so I like the scope of the viewers here, the belief systems. I don't really want to appeal to one particular stripe of viewer. And I know that doesn't happen because I make people upset almost weekly by saying something, either political view or my thoughts on various conspiracies, or my thoughts on whether or not we have a chance to make it out of climate change. You're never going to please everybody all the time, and that's not really my aim. But I wanted to talk quickly just about it's just forever strange to me that people need to cut out differing opinions from their life, or dissenting voices. It seems to be a thing that we're really into these days. Like, if somebody says something that you don't like, or you don't agree with, or possibly you might find shocking or alarming, the immediate thing to do is, unfollow or unsubscribe or go away or block them, or, whatever. And I really don't understand that. I don't understand that mechanism for people. I don't understand that reaction. Mainly because you just shut out information. I mean, you don't have to agree with, I don't know where you will find in life somebody or something that you totally agree with all the time, or how you're, and maybe that's what people are looking for, that life is so unfair and life just holds so much frustration and, so many, I guess, ill surprises, or, life is full of, little things that nag you, and big things that hurt you. And, maybe it's the one thing that people can control, I guess, when they're on the internet, is like who they can see or the information they take in. Or, you're, if you can establish any kind of control in your life, I guess that's what people do. But still, I just, I take in lots of information from people that I don't 100% agree with, or if they say something that I think is a little funky, it doesn't necessarily drive me, away from getting information from them. If it's a repeated thing, or if it's like something where I feel like they've shifted and their whole view is off, then like that's a different story. But still, I don't know. What's funny to me is if you agree with, 90% of what I'm saying on this channel, I just find it interesting when people find a problem with, something I bring up, and it's just so horrifying to them that I would actually think about this or consider this idea, that they're like, I'm out of here. That just seems a little bit silly to me. But I'm not talking about anything specifically. I'm just kind of spitballing right now. This is just an opening kind of segue rant. But I really do encourage people to interact with people on the internet and with ideas and things that maybe they don't see scientifically, dispassionately. Um, try to take the emotion out of it and try to take in information without, being like insulted by it. And, that doesn't mean that, if you totally disagree with something or if you find something totally absurd that you have to continue to listen to it or whatever. But I just, I don't know. Where somebody stands in the spectrum as far as like how they think or where their intelligence lies, or um, if I feel like somebody carries a lot of weight in my book and they have a decent opinion on things, if they go out of the circle of my beliefs, I might actually give them more weight, because I'm like, well, I really like mostly what they say about pretty much everything else, and now they're saying something that I don't know if I agree with. But hold on, this is somebody that I respect. Maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'll give it a second look. Maybe I'll reconsider what I think about this thing. That's how I would go about it. But whatever. Before I get way too lost in this train of thought, I think you guys understand. Most of y'all understand what I'm talking about. I mean, for the most part, there's not um, there's not a lot of people really that have a lot of problems with what's going on in this channel. And I'm not necessarily even talking about this channel. I mean, this happens all over social media. But I see it more and more these days where people just really are siloing themselves. It's just a silo effect. You cut out anybody that disagrees with you, and you start blocking people or unfollowing people, or muting people or muting ideas and muting information, and you really just make this wall around your mind, basically. And people get really entrenched in that, and that entrenchment is where all the problems start. And I started this channel to kind of blow through that entrenchment. That's one of the main points of this channel, is to because I think that climate change, especially abrupt climate change, kind of sits over on the conspiracy side a little bit. I mean, climate change is a mainstream kind of liberal idea, and then on the alt right or the right wing side, you have denial. And even all the conspiracy theorists think that climate change is not happening. But the thing is that climate change exists outside of both of those spectrums, and the reality of climate change kind of exists in this place that's almost too wild for either side to consider. So it's kind of like the ultimate conspiracy theory, and the messed up thing about it is it's the ultimate conspiracy theory because it's true. It's based on facts, and people just cannot get their minds around it. And so, you have people, everybody knows you're on this channel, you present people with these ideas, and people are like, I don't think so. No, thank you. I don't want this information. No, I can't take this in. So I'm going to, even people that might believe in climate change might just be like, yeah, okay, sure, that sounds pretty bad, but anyways, furthermore, what are we going to do? Or that doesn't not going to alter anything that I do with my life in the near future. So if you exist in that realm of where you understand the reality of abrupt climate change, you kind of do sit in the crazy world of the conspiracy theorists in a fashion. So I find it in just a juxtaposition in a space between conspiracy, fact, and reality, and what the mainstream and what the powers that be want you to think reality is. So that's a whole nother thing. The propaganda that we're fed every single day is very, very real, and people really believe this stuff. They're really, really married to it. They're really invested in it. And if you tell them no, that's not true, they will lose their ever-loving minds. And it's just finding truth in all of those paradigms in the conspiracy world, in the climate change world, in the mainstream liberal propaganda world, in the right-wing propaganda world, you know, finding truth among all that stuff is really, really difficult. That's all, and that's my goal with this channel. It's not just about climate change. It's about the truth beyond all of those silos of thought. And I know I go off on this once in a while, but I really, 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 I'm amazed almost daily by these thought processes that people have, and by the, you know, the pearl clutching and the, oh my God, how could you think that? Oh, you know, just on both sides. Deniers come in this channel. What a climate change? Just so like, you know, whatever. Anyways, when somebody who understands the ridiculousness of denialism, but holds another thought that's equally just as silly and uses the same kind of language. What? Are you crazy? It's comedy is what it is. It's well, you know, it's a dark comedy. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk about climate change. 40,000 joined first national climate march in Amsterdam. This is from France24.com, and this is from yesterday. Tens of thousands of people marched through the heavy rain in Amsterdam Sunday, calling on the Dutch government to act to counter the effects of climate change. The organizers, including Greenpeace and a number of Dutch groups, said around 40,000 turned out for the demonstration. That's a good number of people, the first of its kind in the Netherlands. The high turnout is the proof that people now want a decisive policy on climate from the government, they said in a statement. The Netherlands is particularly vulnerable to the consequences of climate change, as part of the country lies below sea level and some of its land has been reclaimed from the sea. We are under sea level, so we really need to do something about it, said one demonstrator, Esther Leverstein, a 21-year-old climate studies student at Amsterdam University. We're great with water management, but we need to step up our game. Gert van Ries, a 72-year-old pensioner, said she was concerned for future generations. We have 7 grandchildren, and sometimes we are really worried, excuse me. So that's why we are here. It really should change. In February, around 15,000 school students skipped school to march for action on climate change, following the example of their fellow students across the border in Belgium. A second youth march for climate is scheduled for Thursday in Amsterdam. And I do believe, well, they're saying Thursday, but there's apparently a big demonstration plan for the 15th of March, which is Friday, and also as well on April 15th. So both of those days, March 15th, April 15th, are big climate action days. If you guys, you know, if there's something happening in your area and you want to get involved, you want to know what's going on. I'm wall-to-wall busy myself, but I am going to try and find out some information in the Los Angeles area, or maybe in the US. If there's anything going on those dates, I will try to relay that information to you. Okay. I will find what I can for myself and for others. Here's another article from Eudaimonia, which is I think something from Medium, medium.com. Is that a George Soros funded site? Somebody asked me the other day about Medium. I was like, okay. Again, just silliness. Why the headline is why we have just 1 decade left to fix the future. Humanity's path divides into irreversible collapse and ongoing progress right now. This is by Umair Haq, March 2nd. We have, by my reckoning, about a decade. Until what? For what? To right humanity's ship, my friends. Do you think we are anywhere near ready for that task? Are we even undertaking it, let alone aware of it as the challenge of this century, this generation, this age? It's every bit as significant as a great world war, as a terrible plague, as a super volcano. It's irreversibility, lethality, things that we can't later change, getting locked in, baked in, hardwired. Humanity's three great existential threats are going to reach a point of irreversible lethality in a decade, a point where it's game over. The future's locked in, and it's a horrific one. 1 decade, maybe 2, if we're really generous. Let's start those 3 threats with climate change. Are you sick of hearing about it? Do you turn off your brain the moment someone like me mentions it? It's okay. I do too, more than I should. But we need to talk about the state of the world, my friends, and we must begin here. The most authoritative recent estimate says we have about 12 years left to limit global warming to reasonable limits. About an average of 1.5 degrees or so. More than that, and the effects start to become catastrophic. Though even that level of warming is severe and ruinous. 12 years, call it a decade. We have just a decade left to prevent catastrophic climate change. 1 decade. Let me put that in perspective. That's 2 presidential elections. That's maybe 2 prime ministers. That's 2 World Cups. It's the blink of an eye. What are we doing about it? So far, we are accomplishing precisely nothing. We might be pretending to be working on the problem if we're in the field, or if we support green politics like the Green New Deals and whatnot. But the truth is, what we are actually achieving precisely nothing so far. We're just happily going on melting down our home. Global emissions reached their highest point in 2018, and there isn't a single carbon neutral country on planet Earth yet, not even a company. The first one, the EU hopes to be that by 2050. It leads the world by a very long way. It's a noble aspiration, but there's just one tiny problem. We reached the point of irreversible climate catastrophe 20 years before that. As a world, we are epically failing the challenge of climate change. We are failing it like an idiot fails his life's biggest exam. We are failing our most obvious existential threat incredibly and massively in a way that's shocking, alarming, and literally a little crazy. That sentence is funny because there are times in my life when or there are days in my life when I'm like, am I that idiot that failed life's biggest exam? I don't know. There are always more exams, right? You keep living and life keeps giving you exams and you either pass or you fail. Do you really think that just 10 years from now there will be any further progress than there is now? That there will be a single carbon neutral country in the world? How could there be? The problem, which I'll come to, is that our paradigms and systems are stuck in the past. We can't develop carbon neutral economies and societies, not because of technology, but because our paradigms and systems literally give us no reason whatsoever to. They are built on colonial mentalities of pillage, rape, plunder, and domination. We treat the planet, in short, like a slave. True story. Hence, our economies and societies don't count the planet, skies, rivers, and forests as inherently valuable to begin with, just things to be consumed and destroyed in the process of enriching their masters. Speciesism, anybody? We are better than nature. We are bigger than nature. We are smarter than nature. So therefore, nature, too bad. We're just going to have to bulldoze you over because we need to do stuff, all right? You're in the way. Excuse me. So who's going to stop capitalists and hedge funds and mega corporations from burning, boiling, draining, and depleting them? Who's going to write the laws that give rivers the same rights as people? Who's going to put them in their constitutions? Exactly no one, so far as I can see. And yet a thing that has no inherent value is exactly like a slave. Something that can be used and abused until its dying day, but we have made the planet our slave and we are committing a kind of genocide upon it. And it is difficult. Another interjection is that, to hear how people talk about the Green New Deal, from the right, the Fox Newses, and even the so-called liberals can't even take on board the reality of climate change. They're just like, cannot compute, does not compute, just can't even take it in. They're just like, what are you talking about? You mean we have to stop? What? We can't drive cars and we can't fly airplanes anymore. We can't eat. What? We're all going to be vegetarian? Oh my God. That's just how could we possibly? We are committing a kind of genocide upon the earth. That's not a metaphor. My second challenge is mass extinction. We are killing off somewhere between 50 to 80% of all life on the planet. Think about that for a second. All life on the planet, which is the only life we know anywhere at all. We're simply killing it off. What's wrong with us? Yet the pattern of this genocide upon life itself is also a self-destructive one. We're chopping away the roots of the ecosystem we ourselves depend on. The insects and fish and little birds and plants and trees are dying off first. When they go, a sudden collapse is likely to follow as the whole chain implodes on itself. What are we doing about it? The truth is that we're doing even less than we are about climate change. Nobody really considers mass extinction a problem yet. Institutionally, meaning no political party, no government, no organization, no corporation, literally, nobody in the world cares yet, except you, me, and a handful of conservationists. But how long do we have until our ecosystems begin to collapse? The truth is that nobody knows when, but we do know when. We do know that it will happen suddenly, swiftly, and without much warning, just like ecological collapses tend to. Let's say that we have a decade left to stop, reverse, mitigate, all that. Do you think we have a chance, a snowball's chance in hell, of building a global systems to protect life on planet Earth? How would we begin? Who would write international laws to protect rivers and trees and little birds? Who would enforce them? Who will stop a global economy that thinks killing off all life on the planet is perfect as long as a few billionaires turn into trillionaires? The truth, so far as I can see, is that nobody really has the power, will, or insight to stop the collapse of life on the planet, let alone even think about it or see it. Not yet. Anyways, remember how we treat the planet like a slave because our systems are essentially old supremacist ones, slightly more polite disguise. We treat all life on the planet as our slave too, and I'm hardly some angry anti-fur protester. I'm pointing out a cold and analytical truth. We treat life itself as our slave, and so it's no surprise whatsoever we're killing it off, have abused and violated it, just like we did with slaves. The problem is that we depend crucially on life on planet Earth for our own lives. It is not our slave. It is our mother and father and bread and soil and air and water. We are only its friends, its servants, its guardians, not its slave masters, which is exactly what we will still fatally, wrongly, and foolishly imagine ourselves to be. So our second problem is even bigger and more tragic than our first. But this is a long article, and I guess I'm just going to read it to the end, and that might be it for this video. And I lost my place all of a sudden. Hold on one second. So our second problem is even bigger and more tragic than our first, but we are even further away from dealing with it. So far away, in fact, that it has yet to sink into our consciousness at all. And yet we have just a few years left to begin solving it. Do you think we're likely to get anywhere in 10 years? That brings me to my third problem. What are we likely to spend the next 10 years doing? Let's take a hard look at America and Britain. Instead of dealing with any of their real problems, stagnation, inequality, institutional rot, corruption, malinvestment, greed, selfishness, what have they spent the last several years doing, trying desperately to prevent the self-inflicted catastrophes of fascism and nationalism? Instead of dealing with a single one of its problems, Britain's spent 3 years in the quagmire of Brexit. Hence, life today is worse in every respect than it was just a half decade ago. Instead of dealing with a single one of its problems, America has spent the last 3 years being outraged, scandalized, and taunted by the Trumpists. Hence, American life has simply fallen apart. Many Americans, probably the majority in many regards, live like people in poor countries now. Do you see the theme I'm trying to point out? Let me make it clearer. We're likely to spend the next 10 years dealing with fascism, nationalism, extremism, all forms of self-inflicted political ruin, from kleptocracy to theocracy to oligarchy to authoritarianism. Why? Because the global economy is stagnating. A new class of global super rich have emerged who've essentially hoarded the gains from growth, which means that middle classes are either outright imploding, as in America or Britain, or struggling, like in Europe and much of Asia. In simpler terms, capitalism made capitalists rich, but everyone else is left to live at the edge of perpetual ruin. And yet here we are, failing to question capitalism too, even while the capitalists literally become trillionaires, while the average prole in a rich country now grows a little poorer and more desperate and afraid every single year. How foolish is that? People who live lives of ruinous fear, anxiety, and despair turn on their neighbors, friends, brothers, and mothers. They turn to strongmen, to authoritarians for safety, for worth, for validation, to feel respected and powerful again. By demonizing and dehumanizing the weakest and most powerless in a society, simply taking from them what is missing in their own stagnating lives. These problems are exacerbated in societies which, like America and Britain, are based on people feeling superior. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm sorry. Feeling superior, supreme, above all the rest. Hence, the extreme idiots' nationalism of Brexit and the fascism of Trumpism took root there first. But they are hardly the only ones. The extremist wave has spread across the globe, from Sweden to Germany to India. Nobody is safe, because economics determines the destiny of nations. When middle-class struggle, implode, and fall apart, the inescapable result is the chain reaction of nationalism, extremism, and fascism. That was the great lesson of World War II, and we haven't learned it yet. My bet is that we are going to spend the next decade just trying to keep the fascists at bay. And if we can do that, we will count it as a victory. In a way, I suppose it is, but the truth is more difficult. This decade is a crucial turning point for humanity. It is the point at which our existential threats will all become irreversible. The point at which climate change becomes catastrophic, at which mass extinction will begin collapsing all the systems we depend on, from food to water to air to oil to soil. And this is great that he's pointing this out, because it's not that we have a decade left to turn it around. It's that we probably have a decade until we actually reach the point of collapse, which is when nothing gets turned around and everything goes down. At which a stagnant global economy will harden into something like a feudal caste system, a new class of trillionaires, essentially the kings and lords of a new world of peasants and serfs. The decade is a turning point, choice between irreversible forms, collapse, and ongoing progress. There's a lot of typos in this article. I'm sorry. Between a new dark ages and the continuing upwards trajectory of humankind, but so far, mostly, when we're not in deep, profound denial, we couldn't care less, because there's Facebook and Instagram and Netflix to comfort binge on. Our leaders certainly couldn't care less. They are utterly incompetent. Mostly, as societies, we couldn't care less. Who does that leave exactly? We have just one decade left. Just one decade, in my estimation, to begin undoing these three existential threats. They aren't existential threats in the cartoon sense. The end of humanity. They're existential threats in a real one, a genuinely dangerous one. They will take a world of peace and progress with them. They will reduce human civilization to charred ashes. They will lead to a new dark age. There will be countries who survive and even prosper, sure, but they will be archipelagos of light in a sea of darkness. Every one will be a social democracy. They will be places probably like Sweden and Canada, which can distribute their gains better and therefore invest more of their surplus in things of real worth, and therefore can keep growing their surplus, their real wealth. But the rest of the world is not going to survive the three existential threats of the 21st century. Yes, I mean that. My three threats are going to shatter countries apart like twigs. Do you think I'm joking? Please take a look at the United Kingdom. It's not going to be one after Brexit, just England against its first three colonies. Think about what happens when Miami and Manhattan begin to drown. How united do you think the states will be when they curse people in red states for their folly and ignorance? The three existential threats of the 21st century, climate change, mass extinction, and capitalism, which drives them, are going to rip the world apart. They are going to fracture countries into different regions, ones which choose progress and ones which cling to regress. As they do that, people will flee just as they have in, for example, Syria. But where will they go? The world will be even more nationalist thanks to stagnant capitalism. The result will be a world of broken societies, refugees, waves of migration. It will be a world of shortages, of rationing, and of all the things that come with them. Crime, profiteering, smuggling. It will be one where violence is increasingly considered a perfectly reasonable solution to all the problems above. It will be one where people's thoughts, movements, and actions are carefully monitored and controlled for the sake of eking out dwindling profits from dying systems. It will be a time when all the ignorance and folly of human history resurfaces, from war to genocide to concentration camps, just as in a collapsing America. We have just a decade to prevent that blighted, ruined world from becoming the only one, from that path becoming the only path, from that trajectory getting locked into our futures. Just one decade. So far, my friends, we are doing nothing whatsoever to prevent all the above. We might think we are, we might imagine we are, but we are just flattering ourselves. We are just preening for the sake of comfortably inflated egos. We are trying, sure, some of us, but we are not accomplishing anything so far, not nearly enough to change anything. The truth is that the world is losing the future by the day now. And not enough of us care or are even aware to really change the future from going dark. Not yet. So let us start there, just there, by recognizing how crucial this decade is going to be for humanity and treating it that way, not wasting our time sharing celebrity selfies to escape the end of the world, which our very folly brings about through its negligence, selfishness, and shattering ignorance. Denial, negligence, and abandonment, after all, are choices too. That was a really good article, and I didn't realize it was going to take pretty much the rest of the time in this video, but that is all the time I have for this video. And I'm going to have to end it because this noise is driving me crazy, and I hope it's not driving you crazy as well. So thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.